Welcome to the data overview for Washington Wilkes Comprehensive High School. This overview is intended for all stakeholders, including Board of Education members, teachers, leadership, parents, and even students themselves. And the purpose of this data overview is to review school data in an effort to create awareness to our school strengths and weaknesses. We would like to investigate school dynamics to determine what roles they play in student achievement. We want to look at ways that we can move students' ninth grade literature and American literature and course test scores to higher levels of proficiency, which will, in effect, raise our CCRPI points. And we want to observe trends in school data that are going to allow us to determine ways in which we can increase not just student achievement, but student engagement. So when we talk about the CCRPI index for our school over the last 3 years, we tend to score lower than the state, especially where the bands of proficient and distinguished are concerned. We are higher than the state in the beginning and developing learner categories, and we would like to reverse that. Although we're consistently lower, in 2017 we were able to boast a bit, especially for a small rural single-A school like we are. Our score was 87.9. It ranked us in the top 10% of all Georgia school districts. It placed us number 6 of all class single-A and double-A high schools in Georgia. And we've been a beat beyond school for 3 years straight. And using that analysis, we showed the greatest positive difference between expected performance and actual performance of any school in the state. Now, as this overview was being put together, new scores had come in, and we did not have time to add them, but we do know that our CCRPI score is down to 70.4%, and that is a drastic decline. So, of course, our overarching goal is going to be what we need to do to get those scores up, and a lot of that relies heavily on our end-of-course tests and those proficiency levels. So, as far as demographics go, we can guess that they play a pretty important role in what's happening at the school, particularly with regard to student enrollment. So we are a very rural school in Washington, Georgia. Our campus is midway between Athens and Augusta, 45 miles and 55 miles respectively, on Highway 78. Our school serves roughly 424 students in grades 9 through 12, and all of our students receive free breakfast and lunch because the poverty rate here in Wilkes County is far higher than state and federal averages. So we have a federal grant that feeds the kids breakfast and lunch. Our student population is mostly African American and white. We have 53% African American students, 35% white students, and we have a small number of minority students, 7% Hispanic, 4% multi-race, and 1% Asian. Students receiving programs and services include that large demographic of economically disadvantaged students, which is 94%. 2% English language learners, 9% special education, and 13% gifted. So when you talk about school enrollment, you'll see in the previous slide we talked about demographics and the population being 424. 424 is the number for 2017-2018. Again, I would like to reiterate that we did not have time to add these. These charts had been made already at the time those official numbers came in and the CCRPI percentage came in, but we do know what they are. So when you look at this chart and you see at 2014-2015, the school enrollment goes from 496 all the way down to 448, and then 424. You're seeing a pretty drastic decline when you have a small school like we have. That's a lot of numbers and a lot of FTE money too. So when we look at this, we can make the assumption that it is that poverty and unemployment rate that's causing a lot of families to move out of town. A lot of jobs are in Athens and Augusta, and families are choosing to move there to live and work because it's cheaper than commuting. And so as long as our unemployment rates remain really low, it's safe to say that the enrollment rates will too stay low. So even though the overall enrollment is low, for the first time in 3 years, females outnumber the males. And although the number of male students peaked in 2014-2015, it's steadily declined by roughly 20 male students per year since then. We do have a gifted enrollment that rises very slowly, and we will likely continue to see high levels of economically disadvantaged students as long as those poverty rates and jobless numbers are on the rise. So here we go when we look at gender. Again, 2016-2017 is only a difference of about 8 students, but it's been a while since female students outweighed the male students. And you can see that male population here again go on decline. Our subgroups, pretty standard and average. Again, gifted continues to rise, but we're not seeing much change in those subgroups as far as enrollment goes. Enrollment by race and ethnicity, although enrollment is down, it is especially noticeable that white students have declined steadily in numbers. Our minority groups continue to consistently grow. And as far as enrollment by grade level, we are not much different than a lot of high schools where our 9th grade is always higher for enrollment than our 12th grade, which is traditionally the lowest. And here you see it in the chart. Our African American students here, Hispanic students continue to be on the rise, white students not. And then multi-race students, non-Hispanic, are certainly on the rise as well. When you look at grade levels, you see it taper off. 12th grade has the smallest. And when we look at graduation and dropout rates, I did not include in dropout rates in the presentation, but that is because we didn't have any on the state site. Our numbers were so low that they didn't really count them. But 2017-2018 saw 10 students drop out, and that's a drastic number compared to not including any data to them going to 10 where it was marked. So I didn't think we needed a chart to know that we had what I would consider a somewhat obscene number of students for our small student body. The graduation rates by race and ethnicity are looking good for minority students. Black students are increasingly closing the gap in graduation rates since 2015. And the data that I previously mentioned for this most recent year shows that African American students had an 8% higher graduation rate than white students. And so our graduation by other subgroups, graduation rates for females continues to consistently rise. And to counter that, their male counterparts are on a steady decline. So our male subgroup is really the only subgroup showing that decline. And you see that in the chart here, where you have the economically disadvantaged students on the rise, female students, students with disabilities, kind of level, but male students are on a drastic decline. When you talk about graduation by race, again, African American students were higher than white students in 2015-2016. 2016-2017, just slightly off, slightly different. And we do know already in 2017-2018 that blue bar would be 8% higher. So African American students are really making great gains with regard to graduation rates. We do know that attendance is a growing problem at Washington Wilkes. We have around half of our student population that misses 5 or less days. And students missing 6 to 15 days has gone down over a 3-year period, but the absences for 15 or more has increased by almost 3%. Now, that's a pretty big number for a small school. So, and I would predict this number has gone up. That would be my guess, just based on being a classroom teacher and seeing so many students out for so many days. And I teach a lot of seniors, and that seems to be the student population that does have those high absenteeism rates. You see here where these numbers decline for the 6 to 15 days, but they're going up here. and this is even worse. We know that a missed class is, missed work, and students don't have that knowledge. They're missing what's being taught in class. So we need to pay attention to that. As far as certification levels and years of experience, we have less teachers with specialist degrees than we have had in previous years. But for the first time in many years, we have a teacher who has a doctorate degree. So as more experienced teachers continue to retire, our less experienced teachers are on the rise. So here's where you see that specialist degree declining here. You have your 30-plus year teachers, also steady decline. We had a huge group of those in the last 2 years leave. And then, of course, our less than 1 year experience because we're hiring new teachers. So you kind of expect this kind of bridge. When we talk about race and ethnicity, 55% of our teachers are women and 45% are men. And that's been fairly consistent over the years. Every member of our support staff is African American, but our faculty, our certified teachers lack diversity. It's very problematic. There's a huge disparity between the number of faculty members of color and the number of students of color. So we have 53% black students, but we have a very, very small percent of teachers who are African American. And so see, here's where you see that numbers. And that's been steady as well. It's been many, many years since we've had more African American teachers. So when we look at the student achievement data, we're going to focus on 9th and 12th grade. We don't have district data. We're the only high school. Washington Wilkes, as previously mentioned, has averages that are lower than the state in the proficient and distinguished bands, and we want to focus on what that is. We also know that at 9th grade, students scoring at proficiency are trending higher, and students scoring at the beginner and developing levels are declining, but it's the opposite for American literature. So we want to be able to look at that and see exactly what is happening between 9th and 11th grade to cause that to happen. So here's our achievement bands for 9th grade, and just as we mentioned previously, these are going down for developing and beginner, and that's a good thing. And they are going up in proficient and even distinguished. We cannot say the same for American literature, though. Although we had a couple of more score in the distinguished category, our numbers are going back up from 2014, 2015. They're on the rise again for developing and beginning learners. And we want these bars to be lower and these bars to be higher. As far as the state, how we measure against the state, if you take our most recent scores and you look at the proficiency levels, these are the distinguished and these are the beginning. And you can see where the state is a little higher there. And, the state here for beginning is lower than the high school. So we want to increase these bands. We want to be able to match the state. But when we get over to our proficient and distinguished, which are these red and blue numbers, we want these to be higher. And unfortunately, our state levels don't even match. In 9th grade lit, although a little bit lower, we're running fairly well with them. But we want those numbers to go up, these blue and maroon numbers for distinguished and proficient. That's something we really want to strive to do in order to keep up with the state and get some of those CCRPI points back.